Welcome back to the Kyle Olson Show. A new documentary on America's broken immigration system was released on Friday, and I encourage you to watch it. It's called America's Forgotten, and it's a very interesting contrast between homeless veterans in Los Angeles and the flood of illegal aliens coming across our southern border, and it makes you wonder who American politicians are more interested in helping. Namrata Singh Gujral, who created the movie, is a self-proclaimed Democrat, a registered Democrat, which made her revelations all the more interesting to me. And she joins me now. So the first question I have for you is, what spurred you to make this movie?
So Kyle, first of all, thank you so much for having me. The motivation behind the picture, actually, I was in India last year in 2019, making a picture on bone marrow transplants within ethnically diverse communities. It's a movie called Finding Match. So I did not really leave the United States with the intention of making this picture. As I said to you earlier, I'm a registered Democrat. I follow politics very closely. While I was in India, in North India, in the Himalayas, the first Democratic primary debate was taking place, and I believe there were 9 nominees, and I was very interested in looking at it so I could know who I would be voting for in the primaries for the Democrat Party. As I was watching that debate, Julian Castro from Texas brought up Valeria and Oscar Martinez, a father and daughter who unfortunately died while crossing the river and trying to get to the U.S. It was a very, very disturbing picture and a very disturbing moment for me. Mm-hmm. The next morning, as I was sort of having my chai in India, I Googled young girl who died on the U.S.-Mexico border this week. That's all I Googled. And because I had my location services on, it actually brought up a newspaper article that said 6-year-old who dies on the U.S.-Mexico border. And I thought, well, that girl wasn't 6 years old. She just seemed like a little infant. So I clicked on this story, and Google had given me the story because of the vicinity I was in. And turns out there's actually many, many children that die at our border every year. This wasn't a one-off case that Julian Castro had talked about. And I found that there was a girl that had died in those past few days, not that far away from where I was shooting. So I actually decided to go tell her story from the standpoint of, let's talk about the persecution or violence or poverty or the angst that people feel where they have to put their lives in so much danger to get to the U.S. And that was how the movie started. That's not how the movie ended, because my investigation and my crew's investigation led us to a very different story. But that's how it started.
Which is interesting, because what you found was that these aren't all tired, poor, huddled masses yearning to be free coming across the southern border, are they?
That is correct. And I actually say that in the film, and I talk about in the 21st century how we need to redefine and look at the tired, the poor, the huddled masses picture again, because in our investigation through the making of this picture, we found that over 95% of the people that seek asylum at the southern border there is poverty, persecution, violence, none of the above. And when you talk about poverty, sure, you can look at someone and say, well, by American standards, that's not very rich. But we're talking about people who every single one of them pay anything from a tune of $10,000 up to $80,000 per person to these coyotes to cross the border. So you've got to have that kind of money to be able to even get here. The truly impoverished in any of these countries never make it to our borders.
And see, and this story that you tell in the movie is not talked about in the mainstream media, because I'm in Michigan. My audience is primarily in Michigan. And so we have, the northern border, of course, which is different situation than the southern border. But I read these stories and I see Indians, for example, coming across the southern border. I visited the El Paso area a couple of years ago, and they said there's Brazilians, there are South Americans, there are all sorts of people coming across this border. And I'm thinking to myself, why would an Indian, how does an Indian get into Mexico and then cross the border illegally? Explain that process.
Sure. So actually, I enlisted the help of 2 very well-known journalists from India. We wouldn't know them here, but it's major newspapers called the Hindustan Times as well as the Indian Express. And they've got a couple of reporters, senior journalists there who've been on the illegal immigration beat for several years now and have covered these stories. So I enlisted their help. I wanted to have some validity behind behind what I was going to portray to the American public. And it turns out, and we talk about this in the film, but very quickly, so regardless of where you're coming from, right, whether it's India, South Asia, Pakistan, Africa, different parts of Africa, Nigeria, Senegal, you're coming from wherever, Afghanistan, you're coming from South America, Ecuador, Panama, Mexico, Central America, wherever. We traveled the world making this film. Regardless of where you're coming from, it appears that the normal conduit and the normal route of choice is to come to South America, because there's a couple of countries in South America that are visa-free countries, which means that you can land there without actually asking for even a tourist visa. So there's really no accountability of sorts, if you will. Once you land there, you're then transported by bus or some kind of a road transportation to somewhere near Central America. When you get to about Central America, they actually employ donkeys through the mountains to transport these people to Mexico. When you're in Mexico, your passport and all your documents are stripped, taken away from you. You're given a new identity. You're given a new name. And literally there's a pocket, in your pocket, they put a letter, the coyotes put a letter saying, I am being persecuted. I need political asylum. That's it. And you're given this name. And so your name may be Joe Schmo, and you're said to tell Border Patrol your name is Jane Doe. So basically you show up, you raise your hand, you say, I'm Jane Doe, and I was persecuted, and I'm looking for asylum. And by law, if somebody's asking for asylum, they do run the credible fear claim and stuff, and all of those, some of those things. But literally, would you believe that only about 10% of these cases are actually valid asylum cases, and 90%, and I think in my investigation, perhaps even higher, are just people who are just, there is no violence, there's no persecution, there's no poverty.
Now, you touched on this point earlier, but I really want to focus on it, because to me, it was one of the most shocking moments. But there's a moment in the film where you show a clip of one of the Democrat presidential debates where the candidates are asked who would provide health care benefits to illegal aliens, and they all raise their hands. Then you make the point that coyotes, that is, people who are paid to get migrants across the border, they show that exact same clip to recruit people to make that trek. Tell me about that.
Right. So again, through the journalist contacts that I made in India, they were able to actually set me up with an interview with the coyotes. It's kind of like doing an interview with the Taliban in Afghanistan, I guess. You're not really going to show their faces or tell their names. And that's an understanding that you have as a filmmaker with them. But I was grateful that they were even willing to walk me through the process. So this was, by the way, this is not the only clip. This is how they ensnare, for want of a better word, ensnare people to pay them all that money, whether Central from all over. This is how people are ensnared and come in. So it's the carrot, right? So when you the Democratic primary debate, for example, I think the New York Times had an article following day that said, who does not want to be president, with all of the 9 people that raised their hands. Now, I'm not even saying that the Democratic Party is doing it intentionally to ensnare people. I think they're just doing it because, it gets more votes, and they're not even perhaps maybe thinking as far as this could potentially kill people. The problem is the coyotes and the smugglers literally take this messaging that we talk about in the picture. They take that messaging, and that's the next thing. That's what's being sent out. And so literally these people showing this clip, for example, and saying, well, you are a family of 4. You've got $300,000. Wouldn't you rather pay $200,000 and have free healthcare for the rest of your life? And that's just one example. I mean, there's so many other. Every time my party, unfortunately, comes up with something as in, let's give coronavirus help to the illegal immigrants. They're actually converting that to rupees or Mexican pesos or whatever that is, and showing those numbers, so the numbers look even bigger than they are here. So, people look at it and they go, wow, I mean, this is where I need to be.
Right. One thing I noticed, it's both on the poster but also in the film, is that all of the credits were withheld. Why did you decide to do that?
Actually, it wasn't my decision, Kyle. But I fully respect, I do want to say this, I fully respect everyone's decision. So I think it's the first film in the history of cinema where there's only one name on the film, and that's mine. And that's because we had to put a name, like you couldn't have an anonymous picture made by anonymous people, right? But a lot of the folks that worked on this picture are well known in Hollywood. Some of them are even conservative, and you would never believe that they were conservative. Some of them are like me, they're more moderate Democrats who believe in this country and are just sick and tired of what Hollywood's putting out, but can't say anything because this is where the jobs are. And so when I decided to move forward with the picture, I reached out to many, and a lot of them said, it's too political. This is going to destroy careers. So then a couple of them said, hey, what if I do it and you just put my name out of it? So I said, okay. And then I called all of them back and I said, hey, do you want to just keep your name away from it? And because I needed people to make the film for me. I'm just a director, right? And so then that was the understanding we had. And we had an incredible team of about 60 people all around that basically works on the picture, but my name is the only name associated with the film.
So America's Forgotten is the movie. Where can people watch it?
americasforgottenmovie.com, or if you just Google America's Forgotten, you go to the website. The movie is on our Uniglobe channel, which is our company. It's on Salem, which we just put out Uncle Tom, as well as No Safe Spaces. It's on iScreening. So there's various platforms, but go to americasforgottenmovie.com or Google America's Forgotten.
Namrata Singh Gujral, thank you for joining me today.
The pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me today. For more of my work, go to Breitbart.com or find me on Twitter, Kyle Olson 4. Use the same handle for Parler, Kyle Olson 4, KYLEOLSON and the number 4. This is the Kyle Olson Show.